14th, a lot of you.
Certainly hope you finish up your dinner, but we're going to go ahead and get started tonight so that hopefully we're not here super late for you. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Kendra Helms. I'm the president of the Trucking Association of New York. I want to thank everyone for coming out. This is an excellent crowd. It's a very important issue. Our goal here tonight is just to provide some information on where this project stands. There's a lot of misinformation out there, both through social media and in the press, so we want to make sure everybody fully understands what's going on and what it means to the trucking industry and how to get engaged. So to that end, just quickly, there's a bunch of handouts that were available when you first came in tonight. If you don't have them, you don't necessarily need to get them now, but you might want to grab them before the meeting. First is an informational brochure on that. Second is, and this is going to become important, the how to get involved document, and then with that there's a spreadsheet of various contacts. So this is at the end of the meeting. We're going to talk about some next steps of where we go as an industry on this project, and this will give you some ways just to get yourself engaged. We also have this draft letter that the association will be circulating to get signatures on. So that's going to be post this meeting. We're going to be sending this out to the membership, asking companies to sign on to this letter. This is draft letter. There might be some slight changes made to it. But if you do agree to sign on, we'll send you a copy of the final letter. But it's just sent to the formal, again, reiterating the industry's concern about the I-81 project. There's a copy of an article that I believe was in Sunday's paper, Timely. And then finally, one of the big pieces that we need as an association is this economic impact survey. So as we start really working this project, working this issue, the association needs data on what that economic impact is going to be to the trucking industry. So we put together just some key points for you to consider. Bring this back. There's a second page which is a survey. I would ask that you please take the time as best to your ability to answer those questions so we can start calculating the true cost of what this is going to mean, both to the industry as well as to those businesses and consumers that rely on the industry. We will keep answers confidential, so please, if you're not comfortable putting your name on it, that's fine. But if you do put your name on it, please know we're not going to go out and say, ABC Trucking said it was going to cost this much money unless you tell us that we can. And to that end, there's a question at the very bottom. The association is going to be working on a public relations campaign. And if you're interested in assisting that, letting us use your name, your company, stats from your company in terms of the impact, participating in press conferences, please indicate there that you're interested so that we know we can reach out. All right. So I just want to just take a moment because we are hosting this meeting in conjunction with the Save 81 coalition, and obviously the coalition is here to oppose the grid. But just to give you a sense of who the Save 81 coalition is, it's a diverse coalition of concerned citizens, elected officials, employers, unions, and community groups that believes any plan to rehabilitate 81 must preserve the current traffic pattern and alignment through the region, particularly the stretch of 81 that runs through and connects the community with downtown Syracuse. The coalition is opposed to any effort that would divert the current traffic pattern of 81 away from Syracuse, and this includes the Boulevard plan that's being considered by officials in Albany, would reroute 81 to the east away from Syracuse. So obviously this is, as I said, it's a diverse coalition. It's bringing together some groups that may not have usually worked together, but I think we're all aligned in the concern as far as the grid and the impact that that would have to the trucking industry as well as to many businesses and commuters that rely on having that path to Syracuse. So with that, I'm going to stop talking. Again, thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. I am going to turn the meeting over to Steve Rowan. Steve is with Clinton Stitch Co-op. Steve also serves as our Central Region Vice Chair for the association. Steve?
Thanks, Kendra. I'd like to echo Kendra's sentiments. Thank you, everybody, for taking the time out of your busy schedule to show up. This is one of them things that we can't ignore. We can't put our head in the sand and think it's going to go away and it's all going to take care of itself, because it's not. If we stand by and do nothing, we're going to end up with the grid. That's pretty much a given if we don't do anything. So it's very important that we, our industry, become very involved with this. The DOT, as most of you know, I don't kind of like preaching to the choir, but the DOT has a long history in this area of doing things ass backwards. When the DOT says something, there's a very large group of people that think it's gospel, because the DOT is like this grand wizard that said something, and that's what it is because the DOT said it. Well, we all know what the Wizard of Oz was, right? It was a man behind a curtain. And that's really what the DOT is. When you come right down to it, it's a person someplace or a group of people that are making decisions, not always based on what is best, but maybe what is told to them is best or is perceived by them as best. And some of that will be evidence and some of the information you'll hear from the Save 81 group tonight. If you look back, 695. 695 was a project that was supposed to continue to 81 in Nedrow. The DOT said we don't need it. They stopped it in Fairmount. That's where it ended. If that had continued, the problems for the people west of the city with a grid would be non-existent. So short-sightedness on the DOT has caused that problem. I-690 was supposed to go at least to Fayetteville and then possibly to Chittenango. That abrupt at DeWitt. That's why we have the cluster every day, morning and night, at the DeWitt exit on 481 and Linden Corners. It takes you forever to get through Linden Corners. So they don't have a long history of doing things right. Take a look at the interchange with 690 in the thruway at exit 39. Take a look at the 481 interchange in Cicero. That's near and dear to my heart because we go through it every night. That is probably one of the largest bottlenecks at 4:30, 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock. It is unimaginable the amount of traffic that backs up at that interchange because of the design of that interchange. The DOT has a long history of taking 55-mile-an-hour interstates and putting an exit in with a right-hand turn. And then they wonder why every other week there's a truck flopped over on that exit. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out. So all I'm trying to say is just because the DOT says the grid is the best option, that's just somebody's opinion. It's not, and as you'll find out tonight, it's not based on a lot of things. It's based on a lot of omissions. So I did a little homework, and I know probably there's a good amount of people in this room that have done this or figured it. And at 3:30 in the morning, I went out on 81 and 690 and did this for 2 days just to double check myself. If you're coming from the west and you're going south, it's 3.4 miles from 690, the junction of 690, to the junction of 481 south of the city. So that's not up in my t-shirt. It's 3.4 miles. If you go out to DeWitt and around 481, which is what you would have to do if there was a grid option, it's 11.7 miles, or roughly 3.5 times as farther. That's a problem in itself. The bigger problem for our industry today is the time, right? Everybody's on ELDs. Time is a huge problem for us. The driving time is 3 minutes and 45 seconds, roughly speaking. That's cruise control at the set speed limit, from 690 to 481. If you go out to DeWitt and down 481, it is 11 minutes and 48 seconds. It's over 3¼ times longer drive time. Keep in mind, that's at 3:30 in the morning, and I think I might have passed 1 or 2 vehicles on the highway at that time. Let me see you do that at 7 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock at night. It's not going to happen. So time is going to be a huge factor. The other thing the DOT has admitted, you never, when you talk to anybody from the DOT, is I don't understand why you're making such a big deal of it. It's 3 minutes. That's all it is. It's 3 minutes. The detour is 3 minutes. Well, if you're going from Binghamton to Canada, it is 3 minutes, right? You go out and around 481 minutes through. They totally ignore the western suburbs of the city, where some of our largest employers, some of our largest companies are located. A grid option would have an extreme detrimental effect on everybody located to the west, as much as the people in Salina and Liverpool. So none of that was taken into consideration when it was decided that a grid was the best option. So yesterday morning, I'm sure everybody has seen this, and I know they printed things, right? This was not done by us, okay? This was totally ironic, this editorial. And I don't know if you all got a chance to read it, but there is a handout out there with it on it. Strongly urge you to read it. I only have one disagreement with this article. It talks about how there was, it was wrong to put the interstate through the 15th ward 50 years ago, and I'm not going to debate that. However, the only problem I have with this article is we don't know what the city of Syracuse and the suburbs of Syracuse would have looked like today had 81 not been put there. So it's easy to say it was a mistake because it divided the 15th ward, and I'll give you that. It did divide the 15th ward. But to say that that was a mistake, we don't know that. We don't know how the city would have transformed, how the surrounding communities would have transformed had 81 not been put through the city. At one point, I believe 81 was originally thought to go follow the path of Route 8 up through Utica and up that way there. So what if 81 had gone over there? What would Syracuse look like? What would Utica look like today, right? So that's why it is so important to get this right this time. Two wrongs don't make a right. We're not going to fix anything that was broken 50 years ago by just doing this wrong again. So with that, I'm going to introduce Anne Marie Tellerico. Tellerico.
Different.
And she's from the Save 81 group, and she's going to do her thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Kendra. They helped organize us to put this in this format, so we're happy to come here tonight. I have people from Save 81 here, members of the coalition, and part of what we want to do tonight is, number one, it's not a done deal. I mean, we know there's a group of politicians that'll get up and say, oh, it's all settled. We're far from settled. The money's not appropriated, the studies aren't finished, it's not a done deal. And the fact that even though we've been doing this since what, 2000, I keep saying 1913, but 2011, 12, right, 13, we have been winning because it was supposed to be a done deal by 2017, right? It's supposed to be 15, something like that. And they're not talking about it, but they're listening to us. I got called into a special meeting the other day, just me. Out of all the people that called, that wrote opinions, they said they're listening, they want to do a one-on-one with everyone. But they only picked me out of everyone in this group to go talk with the DOT. And they weren't trying to change my mind. I assumed they were going to offer me a job or something. But, I didn't get the job offer. I left with, I'm sorry I took the time to go. But I represent the hotel and restaurant workers here in Syracuse. And also, that's my paid job, and my global job is I represent the region for unions. I represent the Teamsters, I represent the building trade. They're all under the umbrella of the Central New York Area Labor Federation. And we're 11 counties going down to Tioga, Binghamton, Broome, Tioga, all the way up to, we go west to Delhi and Tri-County area, and we go east to, I get confused, I'm from downstate, and everything is north and south, so I have to look on the map. But we're 11 counties. We go to Ithaca, to Cortland, to Oswego, to Cayuga, and of course Onondaga and Madison County. So we represent all the unions in that area. And I knew it was important to my union because we represent the hotel down the street, the Holiday Inn. And I was just telling them, I was at a press conference, and someone from our business community was with our congressman at the time, and they made it sound like it was a done deal. So I went to talk to my hotel, the Holiday Inn, and he says, you might as well close this up. 81 is that important to us, as is the Thruway. That's what brings the business to us. And that hotel has been vibrant since the 60s. They don't borrow money to renovate. or pay pension, or pay, have sensible rates for the rooms. They do it on their business, and he needs 81. So with that, the group from Salina grew, and that was the initial core group. So I like to brag that I'm the mother of Save 81. I was the founding mother, because at the time there was a lot of men, but now we got women in it too. But, some, right? But anyway, we laugh. But the thing was, I just started out as a hotel and restaurant worker. When I started talking to my affiliated unions, the way we're here talking to membership today, they were like, "Are you kidding? That's really important to me." And it was the letter carriers that are up on Taft Road. They go, "We go to our second job." That's how I get there quickly. I worked down at the Civic Center as an usher. The War Memorial as an usher, or a waitress, or a server, or a bartender. And then it was about, I have to work at Upstate, and I jump over to the babysitter in the morning to bring this kid here and that kid over there. And we started realizing that was important. And then we talked to the truckers and the manufacturing, which Laura's here to represent. Manufacturing, it's manufacturing, but how do they get the product to manufacture, or the product to the consumer? Trucks, transportation. I mean, it was like as if New York State would have built the Erie Canal and 10 years later filled it in and just left a parking lot. Because that's basically what they want to do. They want to take down the viaduct and build what will be a parking lot, because there'll be 12 flashing lights at 30 miles an hour. And if anyone goes down to Upstate now and gets off at Adams, it takes you about 30 minutes at 3 in the afternoon to get, 3 lights? So they actually told me this. The trucks can get off where, Bruce will let you know where the trucks get off, because he knows the roadway. They get off somewhere down by, as you enter Syracuse, that area. They'll go 13 lights, and then they can jump back on 81. Or you can go around and take what Steve told me, the long route. So the amazing thing for me was, the more I spoke to business, the more I spoke to union members, they were all like, "No, we don't want anyone taken down." And I said, "Did you know it's not a done deal?" And they didn't know that. They brought in experts from the Big Dig, talking about the road in Boston and how that really changed the whole city. So when we spoke to the woman who was presenting, and I said, "Gee, the roadway really did that much to Boston?" And she said, "Well, we have to put a lot of money in the neighborhoods. And if you talk here, it's all about, the road's going to make the big difference, and the children are dying from asthma." And, I mean, I know these are problems, but they're going to be better with the cars and the trucks down. I mean, even the librarians in downtown Syracuse told me about 2 weeks ago, I was talking to them, they said, "Oh yeah, we're very concerned. We're concerned about the traffic patterns, we're concerned about the people that hang out here anyway, what's going to happen." So the point we want to make tonight is, it's not a done deal. This is a big coalition. You're going to hear from several people, and behind everyone who's in this room is that big picture that you see with everybody standing. Because we're not a small group. The newspaper's been against us. Some of the outspoken politicians, the DOT, try to flim-flam you when you go to these meetings. But there's time to speak, and that's what we're here for. And the other secret as to, I live on the west side of the city. And you know why I live on the west side of the city? Because they got truck parking. Now you might think that sounds weird, but my husband foolishly became an owner-operator. Before I met him, I would have told him he couldn't. He was a Teamster down in New York. He drove for A&P in Grand Union and delivered meat down in the city. And he used to jump, after he came back from Vietnam, he used to jump around and change companies. It was easy, right? So he decided that he was delivering sheetrock up here. That's how he knew it, for Georgia Pacific. And they had gone owner-operated. So he was coming up here, and then he decided to get a few trucks. You know the dreams we have. He had a few trucks on the road, and then that dissolved back to one truck, and he decided to go over the road. But, as he always says, you know me, I don't read the papers. And he didn't understand the regulation. So with that, he'd be gone 3 weeks and not make any money and not be home. So we moved to Syracuse, seriously. We were living in Westchester County. For truck parking, we parked the truck right next to our house, and it was halfway between He was doing LTLs out of the Midwest, and then going to the East Coast at the time. And then, this time of year was the watermelons. He'd be running watermelons up in Florida and then onions down in Texas. So that's how we moved up here. So when I heard this, I know what 8 miles and 8 minutes means to you guys. I understand that. Every time that truck moves, it's more money out of your pocket. Because I realized I was the one that's managed this business for almost 40 years. Trying to put those dollars together right at the end of the month to pay the bills. And so when I heard this, I said to him immediately, what is it going to, we started figuring out the extra mileage. I don't know, he used to get 5 miles to the gallon. I don't know what you get, but I'm sure it's not much more. So I understood that going around or icing, those of us at home, right, our mouths are in our throat when the weather's bad and we're hoping our trucker gets home and he makes it. And I know what just going around another 10 miles means, but nobody seemed to care. And living on the west side, I live on the turnpike, right on the turnpike. I know what it's like as a consumer just to get around. I said the other day, I'm going to start going to Auburn. It's easy, right? To get to the airport, 2, 3 different roads you have. Everything here is a struggle. And coming from New York City, I don't understand why there's not more interstate roads around here. I still haven't figured out why they haven't put bridges over all the lakes. And I am starting a campaign though. I want to raise West Seneca Turnpike because you can't walk across it. That's the other misnomer. They tell you about these gorgeous boulevards. I know what boulevards do to people. They stop traffic. It's a pain in the neck, right? You got to go every light. And then what do they do to the people? Who crosses? Who crosses on Erie Boulevard now? Hiawatha Boulevard. I don't see people crossing. I did see one. There were 3 women, and they must have been from a country from South America because they had umbrellas. It was during the summer, and they were walking. That's the only people I've seen because we've all been looking, right? We've all been looking, and we've all been tracking mileage as Steve did. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Bruce Keenan, who is going to give a little history. And the reason we're doing this is because when we're obviously we're going to take questions and try and give you other information and research it. We want you to become part of this group because we're regional. We have electeds. Damien did his job and got town supervisors from all over the region. And if you just listen to the gritters, as we call them, it's just everybody wants the grid. No. There's a small group that want it, that's true. But when you start talking to people that it's not a done deal and you have time to have your voice heard, their eyes light up, and we're hoping the governor's eyes continue to keep lighting up because that's the way we're going to get, our goal is to keep Route 81 interstate through the city. They could build another beautiful bridge if they want. We had talked about a tunnel, but that was just to try and get the other side to back down. Or, they could just fix it. We don't care. But that's where we stand. We want to keep it running through the city because we realize that's the economic development we need. Not a couple of parcels of land that, maybe new developers might make some money on, but not the rest of Syracuse. So you'll see, and if you go on our Save 81 website, you'll see that it's a long list of businesses, community, and electeds that are really all for keeping 81. We're hoping you'll join us, and also, we understand it supports the economic life of our community. And the trucks are the economic life, they're the lifeline. So with that, Bruce?
Thank you, Anne Marie. Somehow I got the job of a history lesson. There was a fellow in Syracuse, Stan Robinson, an absolute gentleman, a good friend of mine, and an inner city resident who had the idea at least 10 years ago, probably longer over that, had this idea that this viaduct should be torn down because many years ago it divided the neighborhood and things that Steve mentioned a few minutes ago. And Van is a good friend, his wife's a good friend. I listened to him say it, and I said to myself, That's the dumbest thing I ever heard of. To tear it down but not replace it. It's not dumb that you look at it like it's an impediment, it's a psychological barrier, it's a barrier of many kinds, but it serves a purpose for which it was put in place 60 years ago. And tear it down is a fine idea if you replace it in kind somehow. And but that wasn't part of the program. Some people got behind the idea, thought it was great, and it got momentum. And it got momentum while most of us were thinking it was never going to happen. But as long ago as 2010, the DOT started working on the program. They hired a so-called pass-through traffic study. They set up cameras. I'm going to go to a map here. That's the wrong button. Sorry about that. I'll learn how. They set up cameras down here where 81 and 41 come together, and they set them up again up here at the northern point where they come together, and they set them up where 690 and the thruway come together. It's kind of the Y shape of moving traffic around Syracuse that everybody's familiar with. And the cameras were smart enough that they capture the license plate and the character of the vehicle. They found that 25.5% of all the vehicles that went the whole distance, either here or there, were so-called heavy vehicles, trucks and buses, basically. And the counts that they got on the viaduct in downtown Syracuse, which is basically this area right here, accounted for about 5% of the total traffic on that raised viaduct section in downtown Syracuse. So it's not such a big number in total vehicles, right? That 41 probably couldn't handle it if, in fact, people who don't have GPS in their car, perhaps, and they don't realize that's the longer way around. They could be induced to go around. With the trucks, it's a different thing, absolutely, the way Steve discussed before. But the idea that everything's going to be okay in downtown Syracuse because the through traffic is going to go around and that'll knock the traffic way down. It's only 5% of that total. The state puts out a thing they call AADT, Average Annual Daily Traffic. So it's an estimate based on the traffic numbers they have everywhere of every state road in the state, the interstates and just the regular state roads, anything that has a New York State symbol on it. They do a lot of counts and they put numbers on different segments. Obviously, it's higher in some segments than others. And in 2010, the average ET for this viaduct section in downtown Syracuse is just over 90,000 vehicles a day. In 2014, a few years later, it was 96,000. We've got some drawings here. I'm going to figure out how to get to them. So this is a drawing that was prepared from the state's draft environmental impact statement, which, based on their counts, but projected forward to 2020, which was the year they were going to have it open. And as Steve said earlier, they missed a few deadlines coming down the way. That the peak hour, this is the evening peak hour, would be, according to their numbers, a total of 7,700 vehicles, of which 4,500 would be on the viaduct, and a number 2/3 of that would be on Almond Street under it. Everybody knows Almond Street, it's 2 lanes, kind of weaves around the columns that holds the viaduct up. So that's 2/3 of the count above. But if the average daily traffic in 2013 was 96,000, that means that the peak hour is only 1/5 of the total count. It probably doesn't make a lot of sense. Normally, the peak hour, morning rush hour, evening rush hour, closer to 10% of the daily traffic. It varies, of course, on what the road's all about. 81, apparently, if those numbers are right, carries a steady volume of traffic most of the day. The peak's that much higher than the other hours. On the other hand, maybe these numbers aren't quite right. And if you dig into the state's draft environmental impact statement, you get the real feeling that there's something wrong with most of the numbers in there. So I'm supposed to do a history lesson. In 2016, well, no, I'll go back in time. In 2020, they made a statement that the viaduct is nearing the end of its useful life. I'm not sure what that means. If the George Washington Bridge was nearing the end of its useful life, you wouldn't tear it down, you'd have to replace it. It serves a function. Route 81 serves a function. That isn't the reason to tear it down and not rebuild it, but that's one of the reasons that brings the issue to the table. I think we all agree if we take a look at that road and other state roads around this area, there's a lot of them that are suffering from deferred maintenance. And a little more active maintenance, you probably wouldn't be talking about it being near the end of its useful life. But in reality, it can be repaired. It's going to cost money to repair it. Or you could tear it down and build a whole new one, which was one of the state's thoughts early on. So in 2014, they announced to the public, they were examining 16 options. You could repair it, and by the way, there's 5 different categories, but they were looking at different versions of the categories. They had 16 options, which would include repairing it, tearing it down and building a new viaduct, tear it, keep down and building a depressed highway, down below grade with all the streets crossing and grade level above it, tear it down and build a tunnel, or tear it down and put in a boulevard. And when they did this in 2010, when they did this pass-through study, the preamble to the study says, we're starting the study because the state's looking at tearing down the highway and replacing it with a street-level boulevard. And it was in their head from the beginning of the 10 years. And if you follow through these environmental impact statements they've prepared, you can see a very real pattern where they knew what their favorite was 10 years ago when they started down the road. And it is hard if you really dig into it, and I confess, because of this, I've been forced to dig into it. A lot of this stuff doesn't really make any sense that's in there. So that was 2014. In 2016, and they called it a boulevard, by the way, in 2014. 2016, they announced they're down to 2 options only. It's either going to be a new viaduct, tear it down and build a new viaduct, or the boulevard, except now they called it a community grid. The plans weren't any different, but they had a new name for it. Then in 2016, in the December of 2016, they came out with a draft environmental impact statement, a great big document of, I forgot, 6,000 or 8,000 pages. 12,000? Okay. Be straight here. But they didn't circulate that to the public. They gave it to the FHWA, they gave it to a lot of federal agencies, but they didn't tell the public anything about it. We learned about it, of course, and Save 81 started making Freedom of Information Law requests, what they call a FOIL request. And the state, like most government agencies, they have a checklist. When somebody makes a FOIL request, you pick the first reason why you're not going to respond, and you send a letter saying, we can't do it, your request was too broad. So you refine the request, you make the request again, then you come back with another request. Save 81, I don't remember how many times we filed renewed requests, but after 6 months of doing this, the Corps of Engineers released a copy to us. I'm not even sure why the Corps of Engineers was involved, but there's no waterways there. But they had a copy, they released it to us, we had engineers study it, and it was remarkable the things we found there. If you tore it down and put in a viaduct, a total of 96 traffic movements on intersections all over the core of the city would have what's called a level of service E or F. And the way they calculate the way traffic moves through an intersection, just like school, A, B, C, D, E, F. And E and F mean in traffic lingo the same thing they meant in school. You're not gonna go on to the next class if you get an F. C is the design standard everybody heads for. D is acceptable if you can't get around it anyway. But E and F are absolutely out. You don't accept that as the finished product. And there was a movement, at least one movement at intersections all over, 96 of them that were categorized as either an E or an F. And I don't know if I have a, let's see here. Very significant right here. The intersection of Salina and East Adams, okay? Is that where I am? That's East Adams? Yeah. No, I'm sorry. Here's Salina and East Adams right here, okay? That little park in front of Central High School. They had the levels of service are measured in seconds of delay. And for the northbound movement in the morning rush hour was 186 seconds of delay as you're approaching that Adams Street intersection on Salina. Now you're commuting to work early in the morning, or you're trying to get through downtown to get to someplace early in the morning rush hour. The average traffic signal cycle is 60 seconds. 183 seconds means 183 or 186, I forget which the number was. It means you've sat through 3 red lights before you finally get the chance to go through that traffic intersection. You move a few cars and stop, you move a few more and stop. And that was the worst one, by the way, of the whole group, but that's a very significant, very bad intersection. And it's because they were dumping, pardon me, all of the viaduct, all the 81 traffic on the city streets, and some of it was going to go to 481 DeWitt. Okay, that was the December 2016 draft environmental impact statement. In last April, April 2019, they came out with a new draft environmental impact statement. This one they distributed to the public, and it's been in the newspaper. They launched a very aggressive public relations campaign to go with it, and the purpose of the campaign is so that everybody will know that it's the grid. We don't need to talk about it anymore. Everybody go home and forget about it. It's going to be the grid. And Syracuse Post-Standard, as a willing co-conspirator, has carried the same story out ever since then. The problem with that is it's not a done deal. On the one hand, well, Mitch is going to tell you about that, and I won't kill that part of it. But there are many, many reasons why it's not a done deal. It probably wouldn't get financed in the form it's in now. And they never even talked to the FHWA about what was in this DEIS, and that's who funds the highway work. That's the Federal Highway Works Administration, the division of the federal DOT. Oh, and lo and behold, in this new DEIS, there were no longer 96 intersections that were E or F. It was down to, not a full, it's a movement within an intersection. It was down to like 25 or so. And yet, except for some very minor changes in the traffic plan, there was no difference. But somehow, they found a way to calculate much better levels of service. Which is why I say we should really be concerned about what's in there. The basic traffic counts were taken in 2013, which, by the way, is 7 years ago, obviously. And then they factored in a growth rate, an annual growth rate of traffic counts over the intervening years at 0.3%. Now, what I call the AADT numbers for the viaduct, they've grown at like 2.7% each year, compounding over that period of time. And yet, the DOT put in 1/3%. And there are those who we've talked to who are very concerned about that because they are preparing the community for no growth. And if you implement the plan they want, there's no way to accommodate the growth, even if their numbers are correct. So that's history. I'll take you through a couple of items on here. Well, we'll start. So this is existing conditions from the 2013 traffic counts. And it would be the same thing today. And I think this is the 1/3% growth. The 4,500 vehicles on I-81, 3,200 vehicles below it. Interestingly, this number is 2/3 of what's above. And the way they talk about the viaduct is as if there's no traffic on the street below it today. There's a lot of traffic below it. So that's today. This is what the viaduct would look like if they built it. This is the plan they examined for the viaduct. So when the road was built in 1960, the standards were not nearly as stringent as they are today. And all of those of us who have driven that intersection, those ramps between 690 and 81, the curve is very tight. The traffic lanes aren't particularly wide. There's no shoulder. The weave distances are very short. It was acceptable in 1960, but it wouldn't be if you're going to build a new one today. So they've designed much wider ramps, all new ramps, and interestingly enough, they've got 2 ramps here to fulfill something that wasn't done in 1960. Because today you can't come down 81 and make your way to 690 going west or the other way. They left 1/4 basically of that full interchange out. So that's built into this plan. And then, if I can do this right, this is their plan for the community grid. down here on what used to be Castle Street, okay, right by Martin Luther King School. It would remain a freeway to that point, but it would be a traffic signal here. I can't hold this. It would be a traffic signal here. There will be one at Van Buren right here to get you up on the hill. And then all these little orange blurbs here are signalized intersections. So here's their plan, right? You tear down the viaduct, you take Almond Street, which had, what was the count? 3,200 before, and you tear down the viaduct, you don't replace it, and somehow the Almond Street traffic's down to 1,900. And look what happens. It ends, yes, the street continues, but the boulevard ends at Hiawatha Boulevard. So if you want to get to 690, to Erie Boulevard, sorry. I have Hiawatha Boulevard in my brain, I'm sorry. We own a mall up the street here, which is one of the reasons. So it intersects with Hiawatha, with Erie Boulevard, sorry, right? And if you wanted to get on the interstate highway, you should take 2 blocks to the right if you're going west and north, 3 blocks to the right if you're going east. Or you go left, you go to the west, and you take a new ramp right here. But by the way, if you compare this map with the before map, you'll find that several of the off-ramps coming into town are gone in this new plan. I can't understand any of that. Why would a traffic engineer come up with a plan like this and then go tell the world and tell the Post Standard to tell the world that this is it, this is what we're going to do? There's many crazy things in this plan. Well, you can see what happens if you're driving, just trying to get through the city. If you're not driving goods somewhere, if you live on Onondaga Hill and you want to go to St. Joe's Hospital or the State Fair or the amphitheater or any of these places, you're going to think twice about making that journey to go that distance. Most, I'm going to make an observation that I have no basis for making other than personal experience, so I could be wrong. But I believe that most of the people in the community who like the idea of the grid don't drive 81 today. To the large part, pardon me, it's the university community, mentioned part of the university community. To a large part, it's the university community. They live to the east. They have a different view of life than many of us do. They think in a perfect world, we'd all learn how to either walk or ride a bike or take mass transit where we're going to go. If you're delivering goods,
I'm not part of that.
If you're delivering goods, you're not going to walk there or take a bike or ride mass transit. Obviously, it's an impediment to anything that has to be carried in a truck. I think I'll quit at that point. Let Mitch go forward. This is just a blow.
With that introduction?
Yeah, everything I said about Van Robinson is true about Mitch. He's an absolutely wonderful person. Well, I'll say this quickly. We did present to the community a common plan at one point, which the DOT hasn't paid any attention to, whatever, which would build the boulevard in orange on top and basically take the viaduct and put it under, what's there today. So it would follow the same alignment as today's viaduct with the underground. It would daylight up here where the road is depressed anyway, and it would duck down here in the vicinity of Martin Luther King School, somewhere in that area. We pushed that for a while. There's no reason not to keep pushing it. It could work. It's probably the most expensive alternative that would function the way the viaduct does today, and we could grow it when we're going to grow, not at 3/10 of a point. Nice picture of the tunnel. I don't know where that is. Nobody's driving at. Or, in some quarters, the idea of an elevated, iconic bridge. I have no idea what this would cost, but if you put a bridge in much higher than the low viaduct that's there today, and still build your boulevard, community grid, whatever it is under it, it could have some appeal. But I'll let Mitch take over. I apologize.
I'll defend myself. So, my name is Minch Lewis. I teach metropolitan government and politics at the Maxwell School. But my real concern about this is we've been in the community for 60 years, 55 years. And this is a decision that will have just a major effect on the community. But in particular, it's going to have an effect on the trucking industry. And that's why I'm here today, to really let you know that even though the state is saying it's a done deal, it's not a done deal. And if you're really concerned, as Steve and the rest of us are, about the impact that it has on the trucking industry, you have an opportunity to do something about it, to take some action. So I'm really gonna just do more of what Bruce did in terms of giving you some of the specifics about why this is not a done deal. The cost is not there, the impact of traffic, the link, and we'll talk about these things individually. And now's the time for action. So let's take a look at this. So what are we talking about? This is the viaduct. And this is the area that is under the viaduct. This is the area that's going to come down. So, you know, I mean, we're all generally familiar with that. But let's talk about the cost of the viaduct replacement is intentionally overstated. So the state is telling our community, we got to take this down and we can't replace it. We're going to have this street grid. And so the information that they put out there is missing big pieces of fact. And because it's missing those big pieces of fact, that's why it's not a done deal. So the first one it's missing is it's overstating the cost of the viaduct. Now, how's it doing to that? Well, I included that full interchange at 690 and 81, and it required to take down the building. So here's the interchange. This is 690. This is 81 going up north. They're talking about taking down these buildings here and building two big gigantic ramps that are going to connect 690 and 81. That drives the cost up by $200 million. Plus, it takes down all these buildings. Well, you know what? The community got really upset about that. They don't want those buildings taken down. So the state is you know, loading this thing up so it looks like the viaduct is a bad deal. In fact, those things shouldn't be part of the plan at all. Then they're talking about diverting this traffic to the city streets. Well, Bruce went through the numbers. The numbers don't work. And the reason they don't, what they've done is they've added interchanges at Martin Luther King School and at Glen Avenue. So if you look at those things, what's that going to do? I mean, you guys know, you drive, right? You can't take trucks and put them down on the city streets and not have problems. You know, we're talking about, we want pedestrians, we want bikes and everything. You don't mix all this traffic, all these different types of traffic and not have problems. So that's what all these numbers are about. We'll give you this PowerPoint, but the numbers just, you know, the big thing with the numbers is it just can't make sense. It's gotta create problems, and those problems mean that this is not a done deal because they haven't solved those problems. Just look at what, so this is what we're talking about right here. And this is the area that's gonna come down. So what's gonna happen when the traffic's gonna wind up right here at Martin Luther King School, and it's trying to get up here. So what's it gonna do? This little thing is not able to handle the traffic. So whoops, it's gonna go down here through these city streets, and over here, and over to Sliders. This is a really densely populated residential neighborhood. So all of this traffic is going to be right on those city streets. It just doesn't make any sense.
Can you go back to that slide 1 second? Sure. For those of you that attended down War Memorial when they had the big dog and pony show at the War Memorial, if you remember, we were led to believe that you know, part of the problem is the social aspect of it, right? In all these neighborhoods that back up to 81, they were going to join these neighborhoods with the cemetery. I'm not really sure what the purpose of that was, but whatever. This is still elevated. The only housing that is affected by the grid, by putting the grid in, is the actual what we call the bricks, for lack of a better word.
Pioneer Homes in Central Village.
That is the only
That's
part.
right, yeah, this is Pioneer Homes and.
I mean, you got the
Central
steam
Village.
plant here, you got, what is that, not Toomey, is that Toomey?
Toomey
Toomey
Abbott on the other side.
You know, and of course you got Syracuse University building all this new dormitories. So who's the real driving force, right? But it's not gonna co-join this. This is not gonna join. That's still an elevated portion. Well,
And
it's a ramp, it's a ramp.
It's elevated, but it's also the railroad line. This is a rail line that runs through here to the west. There's no pedestrian link between the university and this lower section of the city. I mean, that's a myth. And the idea that you're going to make this major change to our system in support of a myth is crazy. That's why we think that we've got to just take some action. So the other thing, it cuts the link from the south, from the north side to the south side. I mean, we've got, look at, I mean, this is not an accident that this thing runs here. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of traffic that goes from Canada to the whole east coast south of here, Pennsylvania. And, you know, this takes the whole thing out. Also, you know, we forget where this came from. Originally, Route 11 was the main link between the north and the south. And then the community fathers back in the 50s said, we've got to get all this traffic off the city streets. Why? Because it made a major mess on the city streets. That's where 81 came from. It didn't come from some other plan of, you know, changing demographics in the city or something like it. It came to get the traffic off the city streets. So now we're going to put the traffic back on the city streets? What sense does, I mean, it doesn't make any sense. So anyway, the other thing, that this is incredibly, I think, unbelievable that they have not considered the impact that truck traffic will have on these city streets. There's nothing in the DIS that indicates that anybody has any idea what a 53-foot trailer looks like, or what a truck backing into a loading area to unload, how that works. They get no idea of that. And there's no indication in the DIS that they ever considered that. And you know, the whole idea of trip time, they make a joke out of the trip time. Oh, it's only 2 or 3 minutes. Well, if you're on a clock, that makes a difference. It makes a difference in terms of cost. It makes a difference in terms of pollution, fuel, everything. And they made a joke of that. And in fact, I mean, when you take into consideration the environmental impact is worse when you get done with the community grid. And then, so just as a visual, this is the Martin Luther King School here. This is where 81 is going to end, right here. Okay, and so you're going to get a traffic light. You can take a left and go this way up to the city streets, or you can go this route underneath the railroad track. And I mean, that for a truck take this kind of route is just incredible. So that's the story is that all this stuff just doesn't make sense in terms of taking down this and not replacing it. The real problem is removing it and not replacing it. Save 81 is in favor of, you know, fixing this thing so it's not a disaster. But the idea is the access has to be open. And the other thing is they didn't consider the economic impact at all. So they can't promote this as a done deal because they got all these problems in the DEIS. And you know, what this means is major problems for the trucking industry as well as for the neighborhood community. So, and Steve was going to talk a little bit about, or we're going to talk a little bit about more of the trucking thing. This is pretty clear that this is from a trucking industry, this is a disaster.
Well, just a couple other points that need to be addressed that we all need to be aware of. So we were also led to believe, or told by the DOT, that 481 was going to be upgraded to handle the increased traffic. 481 from south of the city to Cicero is approximately a little over 15 miles of roadway. They are adding an additional lane to 2 miles of roadway in one direction and 2.5 miles the other way. If nothing else, with the grid option, at a minimum, Interstate 481 needs to be converted to a 3-lane highway in both directions from Cicero to, I call it Nedrow, but it's not Nedrow, the south of the city. That is the only way, the amount of traffic that would be forced on the 480 that can handle it. And I know it's kind of close to my home because we're in Cicero, right? At morning rush hour, 481 going from Cicero towards DeWitt is absolute gridlock. Absolute gridlock. It cannot handle the traffic. The reverse going home at night, I'm telling you, there's no worse intersection than 481 and 81 in Cicero in the evening. It is an absolute cluster. Traffic actually backs up from Cicero, from that interchange in Cicero, all the way down to Manningdale, and sometimes as far down as the thruway. 3 lanes on 81 of solid traffic, just inching along. And there are multiple accidents there every night, multiple accidents. The other thing that's not being taken into consideration, that wasn't taken into consideration, so right now we have a major fuel stop in Liverpool, right? The Pilot truck stop. Trucks coming from the south going to the north, they fuel up at the Pilot. Guess who makes money off of that? The county does. You know that, right? We all pay fuel taxes. The county gets tax dollars up. Guess what happens when them trucks, they're not going to go to Cicero on 481 and come back down 81 to go to the Pilot. They're going to go to Hanky Wanky's stop in Oswego or Jefferson County and fuel up there. And guess who's getting those tax dollars that we used to get? Other counties are. So there's a tax increase too. The other issue is, if you look at this, the DOT is building this for today. Actually, it's not, in my opinion, it's not even for today. It's probably for a few years back. There is no future in what they are proposing. There is no future. That's because when you talk to them, they anticipate traffic decreasing because everybody's going to have a bike and everybody's going to walk. My 10-speed will not pull that 53-foot trailer. Not even trying. Probably the people affected, one of the groups affected the worst by this are the fuel haulers. Because the fuel haulers haul out of Ted Park in Van Buren and basically go to every square inch of the county and beyond. I'm just looking at Onondaga County right now. And they are a group of people, like some of us have companies where the drivers leave today and they might come back tomorrow. They have guys that are going to Nedrow and back, then going down maybe Tully and back, and then maybe going over to Fabius and back. So they are dealing with this multiple times during the day. This is a huge impact for them.
Yeah, and just so, you know, it's jobs for everybody. It's jobs and costs for your companies. It's jobs for what we were just talking about with the Pilot. I mean, we have an industry, I mean, I know my husband used to limp home to get to International when his engine had to be redone or repaired. You have stops along the way that are embedded in the system as it is now. And those are businesses, viable businesses, that keep our economy going because we're all interdependent on each other. So from a union point of view, it's about jobs for me. It's about, we talked about Krauss Heinz. Now people are gonna have to take longer to get there, the products are gonna have to take longer to get there. Everything, the cost is just gonna bubble up. And we talked about truck drivers aren't gonna come south to go to the Pilot and get fuel there. They're gonna keep going, right? Or vice versa, if you have to go around. Because the grid people and the state will tell you, well, you can just go around. No big deal. Everything is no big deal. And they don't even have time studies from the West. They were all from St. Joe's Hospital. I don't know, that's like the only hospital they see is there. And it's not just jobs for the truck drivers and the trucking businesses, it's jobs for the little guy that serves coffee, it's jobs for the manufacturers, because we all are interdependent upon each other. And the Erie Canal today are the roads and the trucks are the barges. And without that, we're not gonna be able to go forward. We're gonna take another 60 years to develop a new economy. Right? And how are you gonna get watermelons to the market? So you guys who, and women who deliver produce, you're gonna have to go all the way around 8041, and then, yeah, you are gonna have to come south to get to the market. So I don't, like everybody, I don't understand. Nobody understands this. But we'd like to take some questions or comments.
I think I know the answer to this, and this is a two-part question, but is the city of Syracuse signed on for the grid? The local
Yes.
grid?
Yes.
Absolutely.
So the city of Syracuse can't even afford to buy trucks while there's snow. They're borrowing trucks. They can't afford to fix the roads in the condition that they're in. Where do they think that money's gonna come to fix all the local roads and keep them plowed to the way they need to be plowed?
I love, John, could you give the number of that tax dollars? I love this number. This is just from diesel that goes to Onondaga County from the Violet Station. What's your tax, what's the 800,000? Taxes that the
Sales
county?
tax revenue?
Yeah.
Well, they've over the road fuel tax, diesel, and then gas. It's pretty significant, $several million. But in terms of your question about the city, so the grid actually now is becoming one of the more expensive options. Ben Walsh is clearly wants the grid. There's no question. He won't even talk about anything else. There's no consensus. I mean, they want the grid. They won't even. We've come up with several ideas to come up with, and they'll say, we don't want to talk. You guys had your day. This is our day. So now we're talking mitigation costs. Mitigation costs talks about the things you're talking about. Once they take that 1.25 mile viaduct and drop it into 13 light grid system, right? All those side streets are going to get hammered. So they need $300 to $400 million worth of mitigation costs to fix the side streets, right? Which is what you're talking about. Then you've got the issues with 481. That's mitigation costs. So now the grid, which was originally the grid was what, $1 billion, 900 million?
It was,
1.3?
well, it started out at $1.2 billion or $1.3 billion, and then it became $1.8 billion.
Yeah, so it's $1 billion, but that doesn't include mitigation costs. So Center State CEO has already gone to the county and said, look, we need $300 or $400 million for city streets. Okay. And then you need $700 or $800 million for 481. So now you're up to $3 billion for this grid.
Well,
And-
those mitigation costs are the costs they keep giving too. That's not a one-time expense.
Yeah.
That's right.
And so now the other thing that's happened is that, as you know, the state's got a $6 billion budget deficit. If this was a done deal, then Cuomo would have come down here, pounded the table like he does with the flooding and say, you know, oh, we're gonna fix this and here's your money. Well, he's not doing that because there's no consensus. If there's no consensus, the federal highway thing, it's gonna delay the funding of it. That's why this thing has been delayed for years, right? So, because we don't have consensus. And Cuomo knows there's no consensus because there's a lot of small and medium-sized and large businesses, large number of people. It's not just Destiny. A lot of people think Destiny's driving the train. It's not. So there's just a large group of people that will be affected by this. And they had a meeting recently, and they came to the city and said, we need money for mitigation costs. And they said, we don't have any money in the budget for the grid, let alone mitigation costs. So the $6 billion budget gap has been actually delaying this. So from our vantage point, we're talking to certain people in the state to keep talking about, by the way, you don't have the money to do this. It's not in the budget now. How are you gonna do this? So the longer we delay, and I think it's important for the truck, well, you guys heard all this, but the trucking industry specifically has to push this narrative. And I don't know, she's been a great asset to our group in terms of her interaction. Kendra's in there, yes. And so
She organized.
Yeah, she organized. So the trucking industry is important. I can tell you from our vantage point with our interests here on 7 North Street, we started with our interests on 7 North Street and the whole group got together. But if you're driving on 81 North, can you put up 81 North, Mitch? If you're driving on 81 North and you hit that 481 on 81 North, to go from that that, where 41 goes off, if you're on 81 North through the city to 7 North Street, that's 6.5 miles. If you take 41 to 81 South to 7 North Street, that's 22.5 miles. I did it on a Sunday at 11 o'clock, right, and timed it, and I took pictures of my speedometer, I took pictures of my mileage. There's no way it's an extra 2 minutes. It's like an extra 13.5 minutes, and that was on a Sunday. So the fact that it's going to be faster to do it. No one's going to drive, like they said earlier, 41 North and then head south. And all those businesses by 690 North, which they also spoke to, St. Joe's, the regional market, all of our businesses on 7 North Street, how are you going to get there? It's not going to happen. And those trucks, you got 96,000 cars and trucks coming up. Whatever percentage, whatever that is, 10, 20% that goes into the grid, that's 13 traffic lights. Mark from Shep from the DOT will tell you, oh, where they're going to go into the grid, and they're going to drive to Erie Boulevard, take a left on Erie Boulevard, take a right on State, take a left on Pearl, and then get on 81 again.
And if you think product and trucks, if you think that's important, then I don't even care. We have, thanks to Damien, he's organized with the first responders, which are the police, the firemen, but the medics. The EMS. They're worried. You know, Kraus is saying, take us to Kraus. 7, 8 minutes. You can't get there.
Yeah, you're
And the DOT saying, what's 7 or 8 minutes? You know, and then that number changes. Well, I guess if you have a heart attack.
I think also, you may have heard them use the phrase DL81. Have you heard that? DL81, Business Loop 81? No. Well, originally they were going to call 81 North as it exists today 41, and they were going to switch 41 to 81. Then they came up with calling 81, which we have today, BL81. So when we asked the question of what is this BL81, Mark Frechette, who's the DOT guy, says, well, that preserves high-speed traffic to the city. I'm like, what do you mean? So when we looked at it, basically, it's still the grid, but he makes it sound like there's high-speed traffic for the truckers going through the city, and it's not. They're just changed the name from a marketing standpoint for the BL81, and you're still going to have trucks going into 13 traffic lanes.
So we answered part one.
Did I answer that question?
I have a question.
Laura has a question.
I have a question for you guys. I work in manufacturing. There are a few people here who work in manufacturing, and you guys probably know we have over 30,000 people in the region producing tangible goods, because you guys move it all around, right? So we heard that the projections on growth, Bruce, were 0.3%. Isn't manufacturing's been growing 8% a year in recent years? Is anybody else growing at a faster rate than 0.3%? Are you guys all growing faster than that?
What about the
Because
hotels?
we are.
What about the hotels? Are they commensurate with that 3.5%?
I don't know, I'm just talking about the growth that you're seeing from your industry. Are you growing faster than that percentage?
Of course they are.
Hopefully.
So that's something we probably need to express to the powers that be, I think. 'Cause
Yeah,
with
no,
manufacturing's growing.
That's one of the statistics when Kendra said the survey. That's the kind of language that we want to throw back at them. As you can see, we have plenty of research data now. But we're hoping from to have your voices heard, that's what this survey will provide through your organization that wants to speak to you. And that's why it's going to take a little work, but that's the data that we're going to say to them. We know your data is wrong because it's wrong in so many places already. So we just need data from all of you to build. We have to be, I think of that all, to demonstrate to them that we're a coalition. We're not a few angry Salina business people, because that's how they make us.
I just want to mention something real quick. I'm Damian Ulatowski, I'm the supervisor for the town of Clay. Clay is the largest town in Onondaga County, about 60,000 people. And there are 18 other towns in just Onondaga County alone. Every single one of us is part of this coalition, as well as 13 towns. And the reason I'm telling you that is because the number of people that we represent is 2/3 of the total population of the county. The city is a fraction of it, but this is there to benefit the city, this grid option, all right? Where most of us are out in the suburbs. This is something we need to think about as well, because from the research that I've done, unofficial, as was mentioned from Bruce, there are some unofficial, things that happen here. Traffic basically from Tully South is going to go straight through to Watertown, and from Central Square North, they're going to do the same thing. They're going to drive straight through. They have no desire to go into the city, for the most part. It's that traffic in between, which is where all the towns are located, if you think about it, okay? You're going to put traffic on a road that's not built for it, that can't handle it. I think something like an improved viaduct is really the way to go. And if you can put your voices together with ours, we're going to become a very, very loud voice that needs to be reckoned with. And that's really why we're here today. Because as was just alluded to, we also have EMS folks now from Oswego County and Onondaga County that are concerned about getting those people who need a ride in an ambulance efficiently to the hospitals to take care of them.
Excuse me. So, I'm Lee Hudson. We're in agriculture. So what is Ryan McMahon telling the town, Zach?
Ryan McMahon is being rather quiet. All right?
How about John
I could have said something different a year and a half ago.
Okay. How about our congressman for our district?
Our congressman is very much in our corner, but he doesn't vocalize it. I think I can safely say that.
I can say, just to add to that, so we go to, as an association, we go to Washington every year as our Call on Washington program. We were most recently there in October. We met with Congressman Canco. I will say the same thing. When we met with him one-on-one, it is very clear that he is opposed to the grid option, but you're not going to really hear him out in the public forum stating that.
Yes?
I'll get hold of him.
So, I'm Stephanie Jackson, and I'm actually running against Pamela Hunter for New York State Assembly in the 128th District. That represents the town of Salina, town of DeWitt, town of Onondaga Nation, and part of the south and west side of the city of Syracuse. I'm on board with you guys to Save 81 fully. I represent the manufacturing. This is my background of working, and all of you guys, all in the area. So I'd like to connect with all of you guys who put this together, so that way I can also help to champion what you guys need. Perfect.
Let me just add to what you said about Ryan.
Yes.
So in terms of Ryan's plan, obviously, he's trying to keep an open dialogue with the city because he wants a good communication.
Well, that's
and
all
also,
of this is very important to all of us.
Yeah.
The city is important, the county is important, the highway is important.
well, you don't have to be, look at,
But I'm just saying, we need to work together. If this is a great plan, why don't they take down 690 while they're at it? I'm serious. I'm not, that's how you have to go back at these people. Because we'll go back to Genesee Street, Erie Boulevard. If that's the grand plan, why did we do this so many years ago? There's businesses, the mall is here now, that's having struggles. All of us are struggling in this state. We're all struggling to stay in this state. And they don't care anything about what goes on with us as businesses. We have so many regulations coming at us, we can't keep up with all this stuff.
well, what's funny about that you said that is when they built 81 North, they bifurcated Salina. They cut it right in half. But you don't see them coming to fix that.
Right.
But
And it's gotta
that's the thing, they're putting out a lot of propaganda that it's over, it's decided. So we're really about getting that word out and hoping that you take this back.
Well, that's exactly why we're here tonight, right? Because even within conversations with the membership, we've been at meetings, as I stated right in the beginning, there is a lot of misinformation out there. And so we were starting to get the sense that a lot of companies in the industry didn't fully understand what was in the DEIS, what the proposal was, or that there's still an opportunity here to affect change. As been pointed out, they've understated the cost of the grid by not doing the enhancements to 481 that are necessary. The enhancements that they're proposing don't even handle today's traffic. I think the most recent number I saw as far as freight growth, it's like 40 or 45% growth is projected through the next 10 to 15 years. This is not accommodating that growth. And as far as through traffic, thinking that trucks will avoid the grid and go around, they're not considering e-commerce and how much that is exploding. So there's a significant amount of traffic that's not even on the road today that is going to continue to increase as e-commerce continues to explode. And those trucks will be going onto the grid because they're making local delivery, particularly to consumers.
Well, the new warehouse is gonna build.
The new warehouse isn't even been addressed yet.
It works for that.
1,000 trucks.
So the reason we're here today is because we understand the issues. So I know that we're looking for information so that as an association, you as members, that we can go back, we can put pressure on the governor's office, that we can work with local elected officials to really drive home that this is not going to work and what the economic impact is. We are working nationally as well with our national organization, the American Trucking Association, as well as connections within Federal Highway to make sure we understand what our concerns are. The economic impact portion of this DEIS is pretty much non-existent. And that is a big piece. And to be known too, because I don't know that we necessarily talked about this, they haven't even submitted the DEIS to Federal Highway. So this isn't even open yet for public comment. So all these hearings that they held across the state, those aren't even official. So there is still a lot of opportunity for the industry and for individuals that are concerned with this. Once that DEIS is submitted, once the official comment period opens, to be able to get those comments on record. And Federal Highway has to approve all this. They don't get any funding if Federal Highway doesn't approve it. So there's still a lot of opportunity here, and that was really the reason why we wanted to pull this together. Steve has really been a champion. He sits on the board. He brought this up at our meeting in December, which is what prompted this meeting. And then from here, you know, we'll continue to keep the dialogue open and start this public relations campaign specifically with the trucking industry and our opposition to the grid. Now, as far as alternative, we haven't necessarily put our weight behind one or the other alternatives. Our main concern is that it remain a thoroughfare. So whether that's rebuilding the viaduct, whether it's building an iconic bridge, I will say we have concerns with the tunnel because of the fuel haulers, hazmat restrictions, so we have some significant concerns there. But our main objective is to ensure that we have that access on 81 as we do today. So, and I know there was a couple of hints.
Seems to me one of the key linchpins is the mayor of Syracuse. So my suggestion would be we try to band together and endorse competition for that mayor that understands what the community grid will do.
So we will have to have conversations as far as our legislative or political actions as it relates to this. Typically, as an association, we haven't endorsed candidates. We will support or maybe not support as much candidates that are currently in office, but we haven't typically endorsed non-incumbents, just for a variety of reasons. It's not to say that we wouldn't. There's certainly possibilities and circumstances that might encourage us to do so. That would obviously be a discussion.
Yeah, Mayor Walsh has already decided. Sounds like he's already decided.
Yeah, but I think
That's not gonna help.
understanding Walsh, I think Walsh is the way he is, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but
We've met with him several times.
he's, as the mayor of the city, this is important to the city, right? So how do you get reelected? You gotta get the people behind you. He needs to be on the same side his residents are. He made a promise. Yeah,
Well, the other thing is, the politicians, even on our side, have been afraid to speak up because the group that wants the grid is a tiny group, but they're very vocal and they keep bringing up the social justice issue, the breathing. Seriously, they divided the neighborhood. This is why a coalition as broad as ours is, I know, then we find out half the people lived in that neighborhood over the years. It's been a very multicultural neighborhood. But the politicians are afraid that if they speak up to keep 81 going through, that they're gonna be on the wrong side of the argument. So you haven't heard a lot of people speaking up about it. So that's why we have to build this coalition and get, you know, and we're doing it. Like, we just found out the EMS are doing their own press conference shortly. We've done press conferences. But we have to show the depth of it so that the politicians They go by polls. They realize there's a lot of people bored, they're gonna start speaking up. Spoken to, Bill Magnarelli's probably been the only, am I right? He's been the one politician
Yeah,
that isn't afraid to speak, consistently not afraid to speak up.
Can I-
So was John Deeba, yes, sir?
All right, so where are we with, in that is social media? Do we have a Facebook page?
Yes.
Yeah, and the webinar, so having something like this, the webinar that can be on YouTube, or that can be somewhere where, my wife is big on quick hits that'll touch all the facts, and she's big on it. You can't say it in 2 or 3 minutes,
Right.
and no one's gonna listen to it, but just being able to kind of get that message out, because everyone is on Facebook, you get the
Yes.
news from Facebook. So, again, I don't know what the push is, but to be able to get that information out and share it with all your friends.
Yeah. Cookie will speak to that.
I'd like to address the marketing aspect. So there is a Save 81 Facebook page, and every day there's a post. And if nothing else, if you can use your own voices, as well as working with Kendra and the association, but if you can use your own voices with your own family, your own friends, your own coworkers, and share what you have learned, what you think, what you know, that will be exponentially helpful. That's the beauty of social media. So if you have a Facebook page, if you have a Twitter account, connect with the Save 81. When you see the post, share it to your own page. Make a comment. I now know more about this, and I can't be more upset about the potential of a grid. Or I truly believe we have to save 81. Join me, ask me, whatever. Just talk to people, whether it's social media or face-to-face. Mention it. We'll post videos as well. We have a website, save81.org, and you can sign a petition there as well as the one that we have here tonight. You can learn, you can find out who your electeds are. There's on the little trifold brochure that you've got tonight, on the back, there's like 8 things that you can do. You personally, you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, things that you can do. There's a panel that has a bunch of red dots, and next to each dot is an action. So you can help. Every single one of us can help.
And
So
we need, every so often, we need people to give testimony, maybe on video, these are things we're always looking for. And however you want your depth of service to be to this cause, we have something for you to do.
So there's a number of things too that we're looking at related to marketing and the outreach. And that's why, again, the survey is so important. So, walk through these questions. There's an example on the back that, Steve had mentioned that our fuel haulers are some of our most impacted. So this gives an example of kind of how they calculated out the potential cost to their company, what the potential trickle down might be to the consumer. The information doesn't have to be exact to the penny, but you can at least show us how you're justifying where that cost is coming from in general numbers. That is very, very helpful. And then at the bottom, as I said earlier, please indicate if you're willing to become part of the face of the campaign. So we'll aggregate some of this data. Like I said, we will keep all information confidential. But some of the stuff that we're looking to do is if you're willing to be part of the face of the campaign, looking at maybe a photo of you or a representative from your company in front of a truck stating this is what it's going to do to our company, this is how it's going to affect our employees. We may not be able to invest, we might have to lay people off depending on it. So we want those stories, but we have to make them real. And that's where, if you're willing to be part of that story, let us know. And then, like I said, after the fact, we'll be sending some more information out. We're drafting the letter to the governor that we'll be asking our members to sign on to. We always say, as an organization, there's strength in numbers, and this is a prime example of when that is so important. So when that letter goes out, the more signatories we can have on that indicating opposition to the grid, the better. So please keep an eye on that for when that gets finalized. We'll obviously send it to everyone that's here tonight. I think Mitch said we can share the presentation.
Yes.
So we'll send that out to everyone so you have that information as well. But getting involved is key. And as an association, we're going to do some things to try and make that as easy as possible for you. And then on the advocacy side, we'll continue to work both at the state and national level with state and local legislators as well as our Congress members to continue to push what that impact is going to be, the true impact of going to a grid would be not just for the trucking industry, but we know every consumer, every business relies on that industry, and they have to consider what those trickle-down impacts. And one thing that hasn't been mentioned tonight that I think everyone in this room should be familiar with is Skinny Atlas, right? So when we start talking about unintended consequences, and we all remember 10 years or so ago what we went through with the truck restrictions in Skinny Atlas, put that on steroids if this happens.
So Skinny Atlas represented in this group?
No, they look, have they officially?
Hubbard and Skinny Atlas should be probably your most.
Early on, everybody in the southwestern part of the county and much of Cuyahoga County were very excited about it.
I was Auburn people.
They've been less active lately, but the Cuyahoga County legislature signed they passed a resolution insisting that 81 stay. The city of Auburn did, and then many townships within Cuyahoga County. That's a few years ago now. We need to stir that up.
Back up.
Yeah.
I went to the town election a few years back with Catco. I mean, we put pressure on him, because we brought that up back then. And in my opinion, I told him it was a wrong answer. He told us at the time that you gotta be careful what happens in 81, because it's your problem. And I said, isn't it your problem? And they changed the subject. But we should be pushing him, that's huge. And like you said, they can't do anything without the federal fund.
Right.
I mean, I would think that, there's probably people in Skinny Atlas that have Catco or something.
It's also in
town.
I mean, they probably can see it tonight.
All right, we're gonna work our way, I think, to the back, so.
I got a question as far as the city fathers or the mayor of the city. Is he looking at this as a possibility, as an opportunity for the federal funding to fix his underground infrastructure? Because obviously if they build a grid, everything underground's gotta be upgraded. And it's already come out a couple of years ago how all that downtown area is, the infrastructure underground is all shot. And so he's got to upgrade this. So are we going to be using federal funds to upgrade the sewer and water problems that he has in downtown Syracuse? I don't think so. I don't think so. I was city auditor for 10 years, so I know the finance, I know something about how the thing is going. I think, he is primarily concerned. He thinks that this is going to be a very substantial benefit for the city. In fact, for all these reasons that we talked about, it's not going to be a benefit. It's not going to increase the tax base. And, I think as somebody in the back said, isn't this going to increase street maintenance costs? Yeah, every year. So I think he's just wrong on the issue, but I don't think he has a grand strategy. Interesting thought.
I wanted to bring up before we take another question. I do this with my husband. I always say, because he always used to complain about things, and I said, he's not always home to vote. Now it's a little extended. But I always made sure he got an absentee ballot, and that he voted. So that might be something this organization might do. It's not political, it's education. You could do registration and vote, and then get the dates out about absentee ballots. Because you're on the road and you're not really sure you're going to be home that day. But now it's like a week or 2 weeks to vote, but it's still. So think about, that's something positive you can do. Get out the vote, but do absentee ballots because you're out of town.
Had some other questions.
These are the questions.
I think there was a hand over here. Sir, do you have Brian?
Representative Catco held 3 town halls. I went to all 3 of them. Steve went to them as well. Quite a few others have gone to them. As far as the federal level, he stated quite clearly that 75% of 81 funding comes from the federal level, like any interstate. He did clearly state that this is not a done deal either. They have to get the approval from the federal level. One of the ploys that was stated is changing it to an 81 business loop, because now it would shift the responsibility to the state level. And they hit a brick wall with that because Cuomo's obviously not going to pick the tab up for the city of Syracuse. But Catco did hold the 3 town hall meetings. The crowds were about split on opinion on it. Everything from, it's going to be wonderful to it's a detriment to society, why we have 81 to begin with. And to someone's earlier point, let's get 690 out of there. Auburn has a boulevard that goes right through the middle of it. You know, that all of us can, in our towns can point to where an interstate may impede traffic crossing. But for them to really realize that someone's gonna travel 3 blocks across the boulevard to get to an SU game from the AXA building, they're insane. Especially in this weather. Today was
Not
great.
today's weather.
It's a lot, you know, as much as you want, because we're also available to speak or send people or give you information for which your churches, your groups, whatever you group, your neighborhood group, whatever it is to get the word out, because that other group, you're right, it sounded like half-half at those
Yeah.
meetings.
Yeah.
But they were a small group, but they very well organized vocally, they were outside handing out leaflets. So we've done the same, but we've been more intent on growing the group because we want to show that, I always think of, you know, look for the union label back in the 70s and they used to show all the factory workers. That's what I always think we should have, we need that big picture billboard somewhere of everybody who is a part of this. So we are willing to come to you to help you through the organization as truckers, but then also in your neighborhoods, you know, or your smaller groups that, yes?
In the people in this room, and we look at something like that, and we see the obvious asinine aspects and how they particularly relate to us. But I'm just curious, in these meetings, what are people espousing as the benefits? What's the other side of the coin? I can't imagine any reasonable.
Yeah, let Mitch talk.
I can't imagine any reasonable person looking at this and saying it's a good idea, but there obviously are people who think so.
They believe that taking down this roadway is going to make all this land available, and that there's going to be all this development that's going to take place on this land, and it's going to pay property taxes. So that's the mayor's primary interest, and he thinks he's going to get major property taxes out of this land when it's developed. They're also thinking that this is going to build a link between the university and the low-income neighborhood that exists at the bottom of the hill, and that this roadway made it impossible for low-income people to move up in life. You know, this is going to change that, and this is going to remedy some of the damage that was done to the 15 floors 50 years ago.
I also was told by a very, I'm sorry. No, I was gonna say, I was told by a very reasonable person that it's not really gonna matter because we're gonna have flying cars.
Yeah.
A very reasonable person told me that we're not gonna need roads anymore.
Can I just add to that? There's a group nationally called the Congress for the New Urbanism. Anytime I hear the word urbanism, I'm worried that there's a planner behind it who's not all that great. And in fact, there's a little book in it. They have a map of 10 cities in America where they want to do the same thing. Syracuse is just one of them. And their argument is they're advocating for walkable cities, accessible public spaces, and human-scaled urban design. All those things sound great, except their method is tear it down, don't replace it. They got to the point where if they got their way, they would create a walkable city, if there's anybody left in the city after they do that. They have no concern for what comes later, and it's clear in every single thing they write. Yes, they've got some grand ideas, and if they could come to be, and they can do them, Franklin Square in the city became a nice area because we in the city at the time got engaged and did it. But we didn't tear down a highway to make it that way. You know, we rehabilitated a bunch of old buildings and put in brick sidewalks and all the things that make it a nice area to be in. That's not their method. They just want to tear it down and not replace it and let everybody else worry about what's going to work then. Do you remember the Alfred Hitchcock movie, I think it was Psycho, right, in the Bates Motel? And one of the opening scenes in the movie is, what was her name, Janet Leigh? Was she? I'm old enough to remember most of this. Janet Leigh comes in and says, how come there's nobody staying in your motel? And what was the actor's name?
Anthony Perkins.
Anthony Perkins says, well, we used to have a lot of business here until they built the bypass around the town. Now we don't get anybody here anymore. So the people in Syracuse who think that this is going to be a great thing for the city, they're not thinking it through. It's not going to be a great thing for the city. They really aren't thinking it through. If it's harder to get from here to there, and you're just a citizen, you're thinking about going to buy something or going to a show, you're gonna think twice about going there because it's harder to get there. And they're gonna get less traffic, less business traffic in the city if the traffic is so awful that you don't wanna fight your way through it, or if you get delayed with all these lights trying to get there. There might be good consequences, but not if you don't handle the traffic. This community grew up around Interstate 81. It's been there 60 years. And all you have to do is look at the housing patterns and the business, the hotels and everything else. They're built because the interstate's there. We cleaned up a scrap yard and oil tanks and all kinds of junk up on Hiawatha Boulevard because 81 was there and 690 was there, and it made sense. And today we draw 20% of our traffic out of Canada. We draw it from a huge area, much bigger than Onondaga County, because of the highways.
But what effect will this have on your business? Seriously?
Yeah, it would hurt it. It would hurt it significantly. There's 5,500 people that work in that building, okay? And if you tear down one leg of the four-legged stool that brings the traffic in, it has to diminish the business.
I think too, just to build off of Bruce's point about this move towards urbanism, another key piece for the industry to think about is this isn't just Syracuse. Already in New York, we're hearing about them tearing down the Skyway out in Buffalo. There's a proposal in the state legislature now about 787 and doing a study about tearing 787 down in Albany. We're in a battle right now with a portion of 278 in New York City, the BQE portion, where there's a continual debate about what to do with that, and that's a triple cantilever, but it carries a significant amount of truck traffic, and there's proposals to just destroy that and move trucks completely off it. It's 278, it's a primary freight network. So this isn't just, and states across the country are looking at these. And so when you have something as significant as Syracuse, which I believe is the first time we're looking at the actual decommissioning of an interstate highway as part of this project, it sets a precedent if they're able to get this done. So it's not just for an interstate business such as trucking. That is another reason why it's so important that we take a stand on this and that we try and do everything we can to make sure the trucking industry's voice is heard, excuse me, and what the impact is going to be, because it's not just Syracuse. You're going to start seeing this in cities across the country. I mean, we've got 4 right here in New York that are looking at it.
In some aspects, I think Syracuse in their minds is a little bit easier target because it's not as big as Albany. So if they can get the resistance moved here, it will set that precedent.
And the 787 situation is very similar to Syracuse, because 787 runs right through, Pearl Street runs right through the south end, and there's a housing community there as well. And a lot of the same arguments, emissions toward the city, toward the neighborhood part. It's very, very similar to what's happening here.
I don't think this maybe is your main talking point, but it's worth examining closer is, the opposition is in the city, and I don't think the city really understands the impacts on it. I think there's support to be gained from businesses and people in the city because of the numbers that you talked about here tonight that's going to be unleashed onto those streets. The infrastructure can't take it, and pollution that's going to happen, and the fact that businesses probably are going to suffer because it's not going to be as easy to get to those businesses now that we do patronize some in the city. And so that's a way, instead of like thinking about Mayor Walsh, because he's going to follow the crowd, is trying to get a message to the rest of the residents of the city that do you realize what this is going to do to you? You may not like seeing this bridge up in the air, but do you realize what it's like when a lot of this traffic gets unleashed onto the ground?
When we've spoken to people in the community, this is not their top item. They're worried about how they're gonna live, where they're gonna live, and it's interesting, because Laura and I were at the ice cream parlor that time, we were telling the same thing. They don't think it's right. We did have some meetings collectively with the leaders, with certain community leadership. It was brutal. They talked about everything but the road. It's like they're throwing all the ills of society onto this road. And
part to speak to that, part of the problem is the DOT's role is to move traffic as efficiently as possible from point A to point B. As what they said earlier is they've turned this into a social injustice issue. So you go to these meetings, and I think there's been, Bruce, 6 independent surveys. It says 65 to 70% of the people in the city and the county do not want the grid. You wouldn't know that from the press and everything else that happens. And if you take a look at just the employees on the 7th North Street corridor, and obviously Destiny has 5,500, we have several thousand, you can take all the area around 7th North Street. 50% of those people live in the city, in some of those areas. What they're talking about is negatively affected by the viaduct. So you wonder how they're going to get there. They're affecting actually people that they're trying to. They think this economic benefit's going to be by creating slivers of. I want to just speak quickly about this real estate. When they take that viaduct down, there's going to be some land left available for development. Everybody knows that any developer in this city that does a deal gets a pilot agreement. A lot of that land's going to go to Syracuse University, probably, Upstate Hospital, whatever, and that will be tax-free land. So this idea that this economist from SU keeps saying they're going to create $110 million worth of real estate taxes is a bunch of baloney. Because nobody pays real estate taxes that does projects in the city of Syracuse. And we don't even know how much land's going to be available for development, so they can think ahead on that. So that's a problem.
So that's a really an interesting thing. Brian, you remember the meeting, CACO's meeting in Auburn?
Yeah.
The mayor, Wall showed up at that meeting. So after the meeting, I went up and introduced myself, and we started having a conversation. And one of the things I said to him was, I keep hearing about all this development that's going to happen if the viaduct comes down. They said, but you currently have 1,550 vacant parcels in the city now. Why don't you develop those first?
Yeah.
And he said, where did you get that number? I said, from your website. 3 days later, that was gone from the website. 3 days later,
All
it was
right,
gone from the
see,
website.
Really?
Yep.
I think though, to your point about the city, right, and I think it was a half a mile on either side of 81 was where they limited the study.
Yeah, I don't even know if it went a half mile.
I don't think it went a half mile.
Well, it didn't go.
So that's another really big point, because they did not really, in what they called the economic analysis for the DEIS, it was maybe a quarter mile on either side of the viaduct. So it didn't go beyond that. So when we're starting to talk about impacts to our members, it doesn't even take that into consideration.
All right, because there is those constituents in the Valley District, because if they're going to kick them off there where Martin Luther King School is, people are going to start jumping off in Nedrow and running down Route 11 or South Slide Street and head right down to the Valley District.
Well, and
That's
that's
the
the point.
constituents
That's the
you
point.
got
They
here.
have not, and I think it was mentioned in there, they have not addressed at all truck diversion.
Because
It's not even been touched on.
I lived there when Route 11 was the main road, and you've got 4 schools right on off of Route 11. Clark Junior High, you've got Meacham School, you've got all these schools that are right.
So again, on your survey, one of the questions is routing. And so what we're looking for is, will you utilize the 481 loop? Are there times that you might utilize the grid, whether it's because it's off-peak or you actually have to be there for a reason, or alternate routes? So in order to continue as efficiently as possible, given all this, what alternate routes might you be considering? Because that's what gets to that point in that truck diversion issue. Because it hasn't been considered.
Keep this in mind too, who are the 2 largest employers in central New York? Upstate University and SU. Upstate is built on every square inch that's available. They can't plant a tree. They don't have enough property to plant a tree. Talking about the social aspect of it, what do you think is going to happen to the people in Pioneer Homes, which is state-owned, if the grid was to go in? What do you think is going to happen to Pioneer Homes?
Eminent domain.
Eminent domain is going to be gone, and that's going to become part of Upstate Hospital. Because you can put a walkway over a grid. You can't put a walkway over the interstate.
Just quickly, this to me from the get-go has always seemed like a result in search of analysis. I assume that result is what is the lowest cost to the state to do this, right? I mean, can you make the case, and I commend you all for studying this issue so closely, but can you make the case when you look at the big picture and the true impact that the cost to the state for keeping the viaduct
It's very
would
close.
be cheaper?
Well, repair.
Yeah, or repair.
It's very close.
That's the cheapest.
Originally,
It's within a couple hundred megs.
Driscoll was driving the train to the governor, Matt Driscoll. And
It's using DOT.
yeah, exactly. And at the first bus, she went to the governor and said, look, this is everybody wants the grid, which is not true. The city wants the grid, which is, that social injustice issue. It's the cheapest option, let's go with that. So he said, okay, we'll do the grid. That's why the DOT always was behind the grid, because it was the cheap. Now it's turned out that it's not the cheapest option. And if you push that narrative because of the budget deficit, quickly there was, I'll tell you, in Gowanus, they have a same thing, where they take the viaduct down to New York to go to Queens, and they had the same, they had consensus, and it got delayed, and they ended up starting to fix it. So they started fixing the viaduct, because no one could come to a decision, and after a few years of all this baloney, they got to the point where they had fixed it, and they didn't have to take it down, and that's what's gonna happen here. If we delay it long enough, they're gonna start repairs on 81, on that viaduct, and then they're gonna end up keeping it. But you can't take one of the largest Canadian feeder routes on the East Coast and put it into a 13 traffic lane grid. It makes absolutely no sense.
So one of the things I'm gonna ask everybody tonight, if you would please, help us get the word out, right? Everybody knows somebody. You all work for you do work for other companies. Make sure people are aware of the effect this is gonna have, especially, you know, the Liverpool, Salina, and especially all those businesses west of the city. If you're part of a company whose headquarters may not be this may not be your headquarters. You know, maybe your headquarters is out in the Midwest or the South someplace. I don't think the importance of this is making it to the people that need to know that this is going to have an effect. It's going to have an effect on your cost of service. Eventually, it's going to have an effect on their cost of goods. And, you know, Kendra touched on it, you know, Amazon, right? Look at the growth of Amazon in the past couple of years, and it's just getting started. Amazon ordered, I think it was the end of December or maybe November, Amazon ordered 10,000 trailers from Great Dane. 10,000 trailers. Those are trailers that are not on the road now. That's stuff they are putting onto the road.
New, right?
That's new. This is Amazon didn't have they're growing a fleet. It's like somebody put Miracle-Gro on it and it's just mushroom, right? So this problem, and I think Mitch did a great job of pointing it out, and Bruce, this is I don't know where they get this feeling that traffic is going to decrease. It is not going to do that. Especially in this area, truck traffic is going to skyrocket. Yeah. It's going to skyrocket.
They don't believe it's going to decrease. They're pushing that narrative because they want the grid. They know it's not going to decrease. And it's a bunch of the way they're presenting it.
Yeah, I just wanted to add one thing. We've heard a lot of comments tonight here, and everything, most of the comments include, yeah, we're going to run traffic around 481. What happens if we lose 481? Right. Just for a few hours. Say you have a serious accident. It's no secret the infrastructure is going down the toilet, and it's going down the toilet fast around here. You know, if you get to the point where, say you have to close 481 down for, like they've done with the 81 project for months on end, because they've had to do resurfacing. You know, I'm a safety manager for one of the fuel transport companies here in Central New York, and I know Rick Wadhams is here, Brian Brundage is here from Turpinings and ARG. We do a lot of fuel transport. We have 2 locations we haul out of. One's right out here to the west, as Steve mentioned, Ted Park. The other one is Brewerton. That's the only 2 locations we have here. And it adds about 10 to 15 minutes to our deliveries if we have to go around that route. I did it for 27 years. I had a location in Portland that I was responsible for maintaining with fuel and gasoline and heating oils. One of the things now, one of the other companies I'm a safety manager for, has a fuel delivery business in the Cortland area. And there's times when they order a load of fuel for the next morning, they have to have it there by 7 o'clock in the morning. If it's not there, their truck's set. They wait for us to get there. So it's really something to take into consideration. And as far as the safety factor, there's very limited routes to get south of Syracuse. You definitely, as a last resort, use Route 11, go up through Lafayette, and in the wintertime, if it's storming, not the place to be with a tractor trailer. And a lot of people don't realize with the proper specking paperwork, and let me not forget, $750, we can now gross up to a grand total of 117,000 pounds on a tractor trailer. So it's really something to think about. Is that what you want running down through those roads? You definitely don't want to go down through the Indian Reservation. As Kendra mentioned, Skinny Atlas doesn't want to see us over there. So what are your choices? If they throttle down and put this in a grid, you're going to have basically the one location 481. Like I say, if something serious happens to that, we're going to be in a real situation. You're going to have trucks backed up all over the place. And it's not just the local truck traffic. A lot of the guys that are coming in from the west are Canadian carriers. They get off at exit 39, they come 690, and then they get on 81. It stands to reason. You know, when I did it, if there was an incident on 81 and I had to divert over to 481, it added another 15 minutes, and it also financially, it's no big deal, but it added another $35 onto the load that I delivered to
But
port.
at least you had the option.
I had the option then.
Now they're gonna take away the option.
Exactly, that's the other thing. So you're gonna want trucks down in down in the city running around?
You're overlooking the possibility of the inland port we keep talking about on the east side of town, which is then gonna dump all of that truck traffic over on 481 in those areas. That's something that's talked
But
about.
that doesn't fit into the DOT's model of build it for yesterday. Right? Build it for yesterday.
Just one thing kind of to add on to what Mark was saying. I'm also a Turkey trucking for other haulers. I also drive that stretch from Lafayette to Farrell Road every day to and from. I'm also assistant chief with Lafayette Fire Department, and we run an ambulance. So I see every spectrum that we've just talked about. The other thing you gotta take in mind, as Mark mentioned, 481. If I have an accident right now on 81 and I shut it down by the way station, the trucks can get off Route 20, or I'm sorry, get off Route 80 in Tully, come back down through and get on at Route 20. If that particular situation happens in Janesville on 41, what is the ultimate route? There is none. You've got, if you get off Janesville and you take a right and you're headed up towards Janesville, there's a little railroad bridge where that gets you. You take a left, where's it get you? Down into DeWitt, where it's already congested right there by Route 5, right by where the Cloverleaf is.
But it adds to the commute of the ambulance, that's got a life-threatening situation.
Yep, if we have a life-threatening situation, say down at Lafayette Ethelfest grounds, most of our patients, if they're cardiac, what hospital they go to? St. Joe's. Okay?
And if it's a fatal, you're shut for 2 or 3 hours.
Correct.
Yeah, there's one accident, we're restructuring it.
How many
You have-
mornings they wake up and they say 81 is closed south with this or closed with that?
If you have an accident on a bridge by Loretto going southbound, which is a one-lane bridge, you're shut down. You're not gonna go down Seneca Turnpike.
You can come, I have truck parking, I could probably pop in. I can pull right in, I got a big circular driveway. We gotta open up Iowa.
So we're coming up on the 8:30 hour, and I know it's a work night or school day, however you want to look at it. So we wanted to try and make sure we got y'all out of here on time. So again, I just want to ask, please, I just realized that we were remiss in putting the word send it. That's my fault, because I put this together, so I will take full responsibility for that. But you can send it back to myself. You can just call the association office. I think everybody has the number, but you should know how to find the number, 518-458-9696. You can send it to our info account. But please make sure you fill this out. Let us know if you want to be part of the campaign. And then there were a lot of great comments and points made, so please make sure you're getting that back to us as well. So anything outside of what we asked for in the survey, whether it's alternate routes, what happens in an incident, some of the concerns that were brought up tonight, all of that is information that we as an association can use as we're advocating to maintain that culture on 81. So please, 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 to Steve's point, get others involved. We have a lot of members that weren't here tonight. We're going to be communicating beyond the central region out to the full state, to the full membership, and trying to engage them as well. There's a lot of non-members that aren't here tonight that are impacted by this. So if you have those companies, published as well. I can give you an electronic version, yes. I can email out the survey to everyone as well. Steve, I don't know if you have any closing remarks.
No, just get involved, sign the petition, like them on, like Save 81 on Facebook. Together, we're much stronger, and anybody in the association knows that. You've seen that from the association year after year after year. Together as a group, we're much stronger than as individuals. Much stronger as a group.
Thank you.
Thank you.